A lot of people close these presentations with contact information, but I'm going to put it at the very beginning in case I make you very bored very quickly and you leave or stop tuning in. This is how you can find me on the internet if you want to see any of my work at any point in time. My Instagram, my website, and the website to my educational venture, if that's something that you are interested in. Every single time I post anything on Instagram, which is almost every single day, I include all of my EXIF information. So if you have questions about what camera was that shot with, what lens did you use, what were your settings, how did you light it, what mode were you on, I put it always, every single time in the EXIF because I know that a lot of my audience is photographers and they want to know that stuff. So you can find that stuff. But I'm not here today to talk to you about Instagram. I'm here today to talk to you about mostly lenses for wedding photography. And I know that sounds like a very dry topic for a presentation, right? Like it sounds like I'm going to stand up here and read you a catalog of lenses, which is definitely not what I'm going to do. But that said, the two questions that I get asked the most, and I have been educating and teaching wedding photographers for about, what year is this? About 8 years now, I would say, somewhere in there. But I don't just educate, I also still shoot. Last year I shot 49 weddings, and I shoot portraits, and I shoot headshots, and lots of stuff. So yes, I have an educational venture. Yes, I do stand up here and teach at workshops and conventions and all of that. But I'm a working photographer first and foremost, and that's the most important thing to me is to take care of my clients. But when I do get asked, and I know you guys have probably seen this in Facebook groups before, right? If you had to shoot a wedding with one lens, if you were on a desert island and you could only have one lens, and my answer is if I was on a desert island and I could only have one thing, it wouldn't be a lens, it would be a boat. But that's apparently not taking the question in the spirit that it was intended. The other question that people ask a lot, and I know you've also seen this in Facebook groups and online, is what lens should I buy next, right? I have a 24 to 70, I have a 70 to 200, what should I buy next? But that's not really the question you should be asking, because putting together a kit of wedding photography gear isn't just buying off of the and now you're a wedding photographer checklist. Because the next lens for me might be a 35-1.4, but you might never want a 35-1.4. That might not even factor into how you shoot. The next lens for you, maybe it should be a 200-2.8. I don't know. So giving you a list of what lenses you should buy and what lens you should have next is really doing you a disservice. The most important thing that you can learn to do is to see and create your own unique style as a photographer, and then buy the lenses and source the gear that will help you make that come to be. So what story are you telling? Why would you pick gear for anything? If you're an artist, if you are a painter, if you are a writer, if you don't know the product you're creating, why would you just go buy tools? You might buy all the wrong stuff. You might go buy a bunch of paints and then realize that you bought a bunch of oil paints, but what you really want to do is a watercolor, and you don't have the right stuff. So putting together the gear bag that I have now, and I'm just going to talk to you about what I use. Am I right? Probably not. But it's just how I shoot, and these are the tools that I've got to make the images that I make. They might be the right tools for you. They might be completely the wrong tools for you. All I can do is talk to my experience and my 18 years of being a photographer and how gear has affected me in the way that I see. So before you even know what lens to pick up and put on your camera, you have to know what kind of story you're telling, and that's really important. So let's take that image that was just up there, for example, and let's throw up two versions of that image. You've got a wide angle, and you've got something that's a little bit more zoomed in. Now, the image on the left, shot with a 35-1.4. The image on the right, shot with a 135-2.0. What story are you telling here? Are you telling the story of a couple and the pylons in the background and Manhattan across the river? Or are you telling a story that's more intimate, of just the couple, where the background elements support the story, but they're not a key player in the story? Because the image on the left is an environmental portrait. There's two subjects, well, technically three, the couple and the city. In the image on the right, it's just the couple. Now you might look at this and say, okay, great, you've got a 35-1.4. Couldn't you have just hopped down off of the rock that you were standing on and gotten closer with the 35-1.4 and then shot it at 1.4? You're gonna lose your background when you do that. You're not. Because the perspective between a 135 and the perspective of a 35 is a very different perspective. Another example. 2 portraits of the same bride. She's in the same spot in both. One is shot with a 135, and one is shot with a 35. And again, it's not just as simple as, well, you could take the image on the right if you got really far back with your 135, or you could take the image on the left if you got super close up with your 35. The focal length that you're choosing is affecting the story you're telling. And yes, some of it is about where you're moving your feet, but the focal length really changes your story. And that's sort of the most important thing. That was the biggest light bulb moment for me when putting together a bag of gear, is how focal length actually changed my story. Here's one more example. Image on the left, 35-1-4. Image on the right, 135-2-0. What's your story? Is it the couple? Is it the car? Is it the cool brick building that used to be cool but is now actually a West Elm? If any of you live in Brooklyn, it's over by the water down in Dumbo. It used to be awesome. Now it's a West Elm, which is actually still awesome, but that's neither here nor there. There are 2 completely different stories being told. Maybe you're telling one, maybe you're telling the other, maybe you're telling both. But it's not just about focal length and what it does with your foreground and background. It's about your perspective and your involvement in the story at each focal length. So with a wide-angle lens, you're closer to the scene. You're part of the moment. You're in people's face. If I'm having a conversation with these people right here in the front row, if I hop down and I sit right here and I'm talking to you, I'm in your moment with you. Or I could be talking to you in the back corner and I'm a little bit removed. So if you look at these 2 images, for example, this again, apparently I've got a big thing for Dumbo in Brooklyn, which I do. They're standing on the rocks, which, by the way, you can't stand on anymore, or else someone will come yell at you and tell you to get off the rocks, which is a very sad story. So don't try this at home. The wide-angle lens tells a story of closeness. There's a separation between your subject and your background. You're in on the moment, right? The exact same setting with a longer lens, sorry, I'm not sure why, got a slide kind of jammed in over there, you're telling a very different story. I'm a little bit removed from what's going on. So the moment that's being captured is a little bit more intimate. It feels like your background is closer to your subject. You have that compression of foreground and background versus the stretching of compression with a wider angle lens. Does that make sense? Are you with me? So it's not just, oh, how do I want to affect the foreground-background relationship? It's how much do I, as the photographer with the camera, want to be in on this scene, if that makes sense. And it's not just, again, to reiterate, about the foreground and background. It's about the closeness to the story you're telling. It's about how much you want the environment to be part of your story and how much you don't. How much you want to be in on the moment that your couple is having versus having a remove. And you don't normally think about things like this when you're thinking of what your next lens purchase is going to be, but I do. I don't buy anything now unless it's going to help me tell a different story. Which, no, I don't know what the next lens I'm going to buy is. Just get that right out of the way. So do you want to be up in on it? Do you want to be part of the moment? Or do you want to step back and be a little bit removed on the moment? Both are powerful. All of these things are powerful. Subject and background relationship, intimacy in the moment. Think about all of these things before just saying, well, I mean, I guess I need a 70-200 because I shoot church ceremonies and I have to stand far back. The proximity that you are to your subjects is not a reason to buy a wide-angle lens or to buy a telephoto lens. Think about it in terms of story, right? So I basically built a 2-hour presentation that I have to give in 45 minutes. So we're just going to keep trotting along. So I'm going to talk to you about my lens progression. And again, I've been doing this for 18 years. And this is sort of how I got to where I'm at right now. The first bag of gear that I had was a bag of lenses that a bunch of other photographers told me that I needed. Right? But when you're new, or when you're new into wedding photography, and your style is new, you don't know what you need. You don't know what lenses are going to tell your story, so you rely on the advice of professionals that you trust, like me, or somebody who speaks before me, or somebody you found on the internet. You look at the work of what other people are making, and you think, okay, I'd like to make work kind of like that. What tools did you use to make those images, right? Which makes perfect sense. But I bought a bag of gear that wasn't necessarily my bag of gear. Has anybody done that? Bought a lens because someone was like, this is a great, Charmy's hand went straight up. You bought a lens because somebody told you it was awesome. Case in point, my 24-70. I don't ever use it. It's so many people's favorite lens, and it's a phenomenal lens, whether you're Nikon or Canon or whatever you use. 24-70 2.8, great all-purpose lens that I never ever used. It was never quite wide enough, it was never quite long enough, and I never found myself reaching for it. So your holy grail lens might be the lens that somebody buys and tries for 6 months and then sells. So you never know. So I had that bag of gear. It was great. Then, instead of not listening to the internet, I decided to double down on listening to the internet, which is never something you should do. And I read a bunch of stuff that said, you need to be a minimalist. You can shoot a whole wedding with a 24-70 and a 70-200, which technically you can. You can shoot a whole wedding with any one lens you pick. It doesn't mean it's going to be good. I could shoot a whole wedding with a 200-2.8. Good luck in a getting ready room, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of all of these other lenses that I don't use, and I'm just going to roll with the 24-70 and a 70-200. But then I kept wanting other things. I kept being like, oh, God, I wish I could go to 1.4 here. Or, you know what, I really wish I had a but I don't have that. And it wasn't really what was working for me. So I tripled down on the internet. Because it's going great. The advice I'm getting so far is going phenomenal. And then I decided to become a prime minimalist. Because someone told me that my zooms were making me lazy. And I listened. For any of you who know me in real life, there are many words you can use to describe me. Lazy is not one of them. So no, my zooms weren't making me lazy. They weren't really the right lenses for me, but I went to this prime minimalist approach, a 35 and an 85. And I know a lot of photographers who shoot that way and do beautiful work. I struggled really hard with this, because I don't just see life at 35 millimeters or just 85 millimeters. So this Zen minimalist bag that I put together because I thought it was going to help me actually hurt me. So what I have now, over years and years and years of trial and error and buying lenses and selling lenses, and I have no problem saying, I bought this lens and it's not the right one for me, and letting it gently go out into the world and be the right lens for someone else. Now, the lenses that I have in my bag help me tell the stories that I want to tell in the way that I want to tell them. Cool story, let's actually talk about it. So, building my bag of lenses. I'm going to talk you through what I've got from most important to least important. And that's where I'm at right now. As of, it's February now, right? As of February 2019, these are the lenses in my bag. It could change tomorrow, or it could be exactly the same for the next 2 years. I don't know. Because even though I have been doing this for a long time, and I feel really good about where my style's at right now and where my bag of gear is at right now, Canon could come out with something new that could work for me. Or I could see something in a different way and want to change something up. There are some lenses that I bought, sold, and then a couple of years later bought again, not liking it then, loving it now. For example, my 35-1.4. I bought a 35-1.4 probably 5 or 6 years ago, tried to use it, didn't fit my style, sold it. It is now one of the most important lenses in my bag. So things will evolve. Don't be afraid to let your gear selection, and I'm not just talking about lenses, I'm talking about flashes and the way you light and camera bodies. Don't be afraid to evolve. So, it's great and all. Let's actually talk about the gear that I have. So, most important lens in my bag is the 24-105 f4. It's an f4. It is not a 2.8. It is the most important lens in my bag because of the versatility to me of the range of focal length, right? 24 is about as wide as I like to go. I like to go much longer than 105, but in a zoom lens, a 24-105 is a phenomenal all-purpose lens. It's a lens my second shooter uses a lot. It's a lens I put on a camera and hand to my assistant a lot. And I'm going to give you the list here, and then I'm going to break down what I use them for coming up next. Next most important lens, if I were buying my bag again in order, the 85-1.4. Not the 1.8, the 1.4. Yep, the 1.4 is definitely more expensive. But when I pull out that 85, I know I'm going to be shooting it at 1.4. Because if I'm not going to shoot it at 1.4, if I'm going to shoot it at 2.8 or 3.5 or f4, I have a 70-200 for that. I'm going to be pulling out the 85 and also my third lens, the 35-1.4, because I want that focal length at 1.4, right? So these are my three most important. So I guess if you forced me to only take 3 lenses to a wedding, it would be these 3. But I have more, so let's do more. All right, lens number 4, the 135-2.0, which is hands down my favorite lens that I've ever shot in my entire career. I love this lens in ways that I can't, there are no words. It is my precious. You would have to tear it out of my cold, dead hands. It is between the focal length, between being able to be at 2.0, this is my favorite lens. So why is it number 4 on my list? Because it's not quite as versatile as the others. You have to have enough distance to be able to use a 135. And a 35 and an 85, they're great. The 24-105 is great. But if I do have that little bit of extra distance, 135-2.0 all the way. Number 5, 100mm macro. Love it. In a pinch, can double as a portrait lens. Number 6, the 70-200 f4. Not the 2.8, the f4. And I'll, again, show you how I use it later. I did have a 70-200 2.8 that I shot almost all the time at f4. I don't have a 70-200 f4 because I'm a girl with weak arms and it's too heavy. I go to the gym, I'm fine. I can lift a 70-200 2.8. But why would I if I'm shooting it at f4 all the time anyhow? Give yourself a break if you can. Wedding days are long. And then, to close it out with the bag, the 28-1.8. And again, you might be like, well, wait a second. Why do you have a 28-1.8 prime? You've got a 24-105, you've got a 35, that's pretty close. I'll show you in a bit. Kind of least important, but still incredibly crucial, the 20mm 2.8. 2 20-ish primes in here. Number 9, I don't know. I could buy something new tomorrow that could be my favorite lens that I've ever bought ever in my entire life. Or I could not buy something new for 2 more years. I don't know, we'll see. So, let me talk you through why these lenses and what story I'm telling with these lenses, right? I'm doing good on time, I'm doing good on time. The 24-105 f4. Hands down, super versatile, all-day lens. What do I use it for? I will use it for ceremonies, even in dark situations, right? Because I'm not afraid to push the ISO on my camera to 3200, to 6400, to 8000, to 12.8 if I have to. Just a note, if you are going to be shooting at something like 12,800, you really want to make sure that you nail your exposure and you compose it exactly the way you want it. Because if you have to push or pull the file and you have to crop the file, that's when you're really going to start seeing noise at 12.8 in a way that makes me think, ooh. So if you are going to go that high, if you find yourself in a dark situation, you can't add additional lights, just be super careful with your exposure, be super careful with your composition. I use it for portraits, if I want to show the whole scene, or if I know I have to make a lot of stuff super, super, super fast, I'll have a 24-105 on one hip. Because sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes you have 5 minutes with the couple, and you've got to make something blazingly fast. That's when I'm going to have a 70-200 on one hip, or a 135, and then a 24-105 on the other. I shoot 2 cameras all the time, always. Engagement sessions, weddings, 2 cameras, 2 cameras. So there's always 2 lenses going on at one point in time, right? Some instances, like if I find myself in portraits, and I've got the 135 on one and the 24-105 on the other, the 135 is sort of my go-to. But when I need to go wider or I want to be, in that pre-135 range, I'm really glad that I've got that extra camera. So I do wear straps all day long. My straps are by RL Handcrafts. If anybody ever wants to know, they're super cool. Mine are the Clydesdale Pros. So if you look up RL Handcrafts and you see the only ones that have padding in the shoulders are the ones that I have. And I resisted wearing straps for a million years because they would bite my underarms. Has anybody ever tried to wear like camera holsters and they like bite your underarms? The RL handcrafts don't bite your underarms. They're great. And everybody's like, this took a weird turn. But it enables me to carry 2 cameras at all points in time instead of just 1 camera and constantly switching lenses. I also took the shoulder straps off of my cameras. My friend Emily gave me really good advice because when I started switching to this holster system, you have to actually put a screw in the bottom of your camera. I wanted to go to hand straps instead because it didn't make any sense if I've got them hanging on holsters. Why do I have neck straps on them also? That's just more ways for me to tangle up and fall down on a wedding day, is having these like free-flowing straps. So I got an Arca Swiss plate for the bottom of each camera, screws right into the bottom. It lets me attach a Peak Design hand strap. So I can, when I pick it up from the holster, I'm holding it through a hand strap. But it will let me add both the hand strap and putting it on those sort of shoulder suspenders with the Arca Swiss plate on the bottom. So if you do decide you want to go that way, just bear that in mind. If you ever have questions for me later, like if you take notes later and you go home tonight and you're like, I have no idea what I just wrote down, get on Facebook, look up Susan Stripling's The Wedding School. We have a huge free Facebook group. You can come in. It is a weird community of kind of phenomenal, strange people, which are my people, which is great. And you can come ask me any questions you want. You can also ask the group any questions. I asked the group this morning to help me find a video game remote that I could program to call weddings with. And that's what we're discussing today, which is kind of awesome. So I sidebarred. But it was kind of an important sidebar because the way I carry my cameras and the fact that I use 2 means that I have 2 lenses at my disposal at any point in time during the day and I don't have to change. So if I'm shooting on a beach, if I'm shooting somewhere dusty or dirty and I don't want junk in my camera, or if I just don't want to take the 2 seconds to change lenses because things are happening, it lets me have 2. So the 24-105, usually by the time I walk out of the prep space to go to either a first look or the ceremony, the 24-105 takes up residence on usually my left hip camera, and there's a reason for it. It's because I reach to the right first. So my all-purpose one for the rest of the day is the 24-105, and it hangs out on the left side for the rest of the day. Ceremony, portraits, sparkler exits, great lens for sparkler exits. You can see it gets used for a little bit of everything. Someone walking down the driveway to get into the car, a first dance from far away, a first dance from up close. Zooms don't make you lazy. You're lazy whether you use a zoom or not, right? Like if you're a lazy person, using a zoom doesn't make you lazier. And using a prime doesn't mean you're less lazy, it just means you get more steps in on a wedding day. Which is kind of cool. I'm at a very low step count today, so we're just gonna keep walking back and forth while we talk. But I do find that for things like a first dance, 24-105 is a really important lens because it lets me do things like the image in the middle on the bottom, and then the image right next to it without having to move my feet. And that's not me being lazy, that's me being unobtrusive. Because I also don't want to be a pain on the wedding day and have guests go back later and be like, so that was super fun, but that photographer was insane. And moving around a lot and pulling focus from things. So for example, you can see on both of those dancing pictures, I'm not shooting into the band, I'm shooting into the crowd, which means that I'm sort of on stage with the couple and everyone can see me, and I want to minimize how much I'm moving around because I don't want to distract them from what's going on. So it's important for me to have an all-purpose lens that I can use at this time to get a lot of great images to tell the story I want to tell without being a distraction. Usually, anytime I'm going to use an off-camera flash for a portrait, like the one on the far left, which was taken in front of a closed garage door outside at night, the 24-105 is a great go-to lens. I don't often shoot close-up portraits like that at anything other than f4. I'm not at 1.4, I'm not at 1.8. I'm the kind of crazy wedding photographer right now who actually cares if my subjects are in focus. Not light and airy, nothing is soft and gentle. I want everything to be harsh and crisp, which just sounds terrible, but we're gonna roll with it. But as you can see, again, it is a very wide range of things that I shoot with this lens, which is why it's so important. Alternatives to this. If you like the range, if you think I kind of need something around about in here, but a 24-105 is not really what I'm looking for, you could try that 24-70 2.8. That's a holy grail lens for a lot of people. It just wasn't for me. There's also a large assortment of primes in this 24 to 105 range. You could replace it with primes. You could find that 35 and 85 is pretty much where you're set when you're using your 24 to 105, so why don't you? If you are an icon photographer, I believe yours is the 24 to 120, which gives you a little bit more range. Next lens, 85-1.4, clarity of purpose. As I said before, when I take that 85-1.4 and I put that on my camera, it is because I'm going to shoot it at 1.4. Now I have to give you a note about 1.4. Do not focus and recompose at 1.4 if you want your pictures in focus. It doesn't matter how far away you are from your subject. It doesn't matter how close you are to your subject. When you're at 1.4, you have such a narrow margin, I guess, of error is what I'm trying to say. So I'm always moving my focal points around in my camera so that, for example, this image that you see right here, there was a focal point directly on top of her diamond. And I moved it over there and did not move myself, and I'm wiggly when I'm shooting. Usually it's because I'm hyper-caffeinated. But also I get in the zone and my hands are crazy and I'm wiggly and I'll fall down on things. And if I even remotely recompose on something like this, I've lost focus. So when you're with your 85, when you're with your 35, when you're at 1.4, just be careful. Move your focal points around in the way that works best for you and make sure you've got a dot on top of whatever you want in focus and stay there. So what do I use the 85-1.4 for? I use it for everything I can. I really, really, really love the look of 1.4. I love the story that it tells. I love the dynamic relationship that it lets me give my subject's relationship with the background. That was a weird run-on sentence. I like that it's a slightly longer lens. I like to live life in a slightly longer lens, right? That's just how I see the stories I'm telling. So adding this 35 in, being a little bit more wide, being a little closer to my subjects, has changed the narrative of a lot of the images that I take. But I still do find that when I'm making my best work, when I'm in my happiest comfort zone, I'm 85 or longer. So I will use it for details. And an 85-1.4 is not often a lens that you think of as a detail lens. I'm not going to shoot rings with it. We're going to get to the macro in a bit, I promise. But I will use it at the start of the day to tell the story of details. And whether you do like shooting details or you don't, they're still an important part of the day. They're something that your clients have purchased and have chosen with care. Oftentimes they're heirlooms. So I think it's my responsibility to create environmental portraits of these heirlooms so that they'll have them for years to come. I like doing detail work. The 85-1.4 is a go-to for getting ready images. Whether it's women getting ready or men getting ready, I really love it, not only because being able to shoot at 1.4 gets rid of the distraction of a lot of New York hotel rooms, which are about the size of that podium, and that includes the bed. It lets me reduce distracting backgrounds. It lets me really focus in on the story that I want to tell, which is a very small sliver of the scene. So getting ready images, ceremonies, in the dark. Why do they do this to us? I don't know. But have you ever gone to a wedding and they're like, yeah, our ceremony is going to be out on the back patio, and you're like, yes, that sounds awesome. And then you go outside and you're like, this is going to be great when it's all lit. And they're like, well, I mean, yeah, it's lit. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not. Oh my gosh, it's not. Like the two twinkle lights hanging from the corners are not. Okay. And then you start going crazy and putting video lights under it and hyperventilating, and it's phenomenal. But the 85-1.4, especially I've been using it a lot now with my new R, the mirrorless. It is a beautiful combo, which lets you, and also if you think about it, if you're at 1.4, it lets you keep raising your ISO higher. So if I'm using the 24 to 105 f4 in a situation like this, the lowest I can go is f4. And that means my ISO has to go way up there to combat. If I'm at 1.4, I can keep my ISO down and give it room to go up if it has to. But I also just really love the story that it tells. It focuses in on the couple. The background elements, you can see them. They're part of the scene, but they're not the focus of the scene. So during ceremonies, I will use it to shoot tables at the reception, especially if I really want to focus in on just a teeny tiny little detail. Like these were the place cards. and they were written on this sweet little like curve of really thick paper. And I just wanted to show the curve and let everything else be this beautiful supporting graphic element in the background. You still know where we are. You still get a sense of time and place, but your eye goes right to your subject. Details of all kinds. Why not? Alternatives. I mean, yes, 24 to 70, 2.8 gets you closer to 1.4, but it doesn't get you all the way to 85, but it's an alternative if that's something you want. 24 to 105 hits you at that 85 millimeter range, but you're at f4, or the 85 1.8. Definitely a more economically priced lens. You will see if you try a 1.8 and you try a 1.4, you'll see where your money is going when you upgrade to the 1.4. But for many, many, many years, the 85 that I had was the 1.8, and it worked great for me. And then when I was ready for the 1.4, I upgraded. There we go. 35 1.4. Lens I used to hate, now I really love it. I don't know why. I have absolutely no scientific explanation for this at all, other than I really do believe that some pieces of gear are the right gear at the right time in your artistic and career path. So I bought it, I sold it, and many years later I bought it again. So here we are. And now I love it. I use it a lot. So when I start a day and I'm shooting prep, I have the 35 to 1.4 on one camera and the 85 1.4 on the other. Those are my go-to prep lenses, and they pretty much stay there the entire time. Getting ready, hanging out, the robe shot, all of that stuff, those are my go-to two lenses there. But it does get a lot of use throughout the rest of the day. Now at 1.4, it lets me isolate my subject from the background in the way that the 85 does, but when I'm at 35, I'm getting more of an environmental scene. Again, like I said before, I'm closer in on the subject, I'm more a part of the story. So, it gets used for lots of stuff, like getting ready, like lots of getting ready. I'll use it for portraits. And again, much like with my 85 1.4, if I have the 35 1.4 and I put that on my camera, it's because I'm going to shoot it at 1.4. Because otherwise, if I'm going to shoot it at f4, I could use my 24 to 105. I have started really enjoying using it, if you look at the top two images, in conjunction with off-camera flash at night. So the 35 1.4 at 1.4 with a single speed light, with a MagMod grid, sometimes 2 grids. I haven't gotten 3 grid crazy, but I know that's coming at some point in time. But that 35, that focal length, that aperture, and that type of off-camera light is starting to create these beautiful environmental portraits that, again, are telling the story that I want to tell. I will use it for first looks. I am a crazy human that will shoot a first look at 1.4. But I have to, again, make sure that my focal point, y'all are looking at me like I'm nuts. I see you. I can see you from up here. It's fine. But I had to really practice with that 35 1.4 to get my focal point directly on someone's face and be able to follow them, to be able to shoot something like a first look. So the image on the left, and again, you're looking at it on a screen, it's very high contrast. All of these images are on my Instagram, they're all on my website if you want to find them later. And everything that you're seeing in here was shot in the last year, I think. Anyhow. First look, and then a little while later, a portrait of the bride by herself in the same spot. Both were at 1.4. Again, you have to be kind of crazy to take a picture of the bride and her dad as they come through a church door at 1.4. But I promise you, once you get the hang of being able to put your focal point exactly where you want it, you're going to become addicted to it. It's great. When I'm using the Mark IV, or when I'm using my mirrorless, a lot of times I will actually be watching these scenes in live view. So on my Mark IV, if I'm holding it up and I'm watching, I've got it set up so I just touch the back screen and it will focus and fire. And I find that I actually, and this is me personally, get a much more accurate focus and fire doing it that way when someone's moving versus working with continuous or holding the camera to my eye. Again, personal preference, something to try. You might hate it. I don't know. I use it a lot in super, super, super dark ceremonies. And you might ask, like, well, why don't you just use a flash or use an off-camera light? a lot of times I have nowhere to put someone holding an off-camera light. Because where I stand for a processional, so let's say whoever is processing is coming down this aisle, right? You've got people sitting over here, you've got people sitting over here. Usually, whoever's waiting for the person processing is standing over here, on this side, right? I will be on the opposite side, and I stay down. I'll literally sit down on the ground, traditionally where the mother of the bride sits. I scoot myself kind of right near that, and I stay down. The only place that I could put an off-camera flash at that point is in front of whoever is standing up waiting on the other side. First of all, I don't have room to put someone there. There's usually a videographer already standing there, blocking the view entirely, bless their hearts. But again, videographers, you know I love you. I just have to make fun of you at least once a presentation. But I also don't want to put a person holding a light that's firing constantly during a ceremony. I just feel like that's a little disrespectful to the sanctity of the ceremony, whether it's religious or not. And back to the thing I said before, where I'm trying to not be obtrusive. You have to, there's a fine line between being unobtrusive and not doing your job. And I'm never going to not get a shot because I'm afraid of stepping in front of someone. But I'm also not going to step in front of people if I don't have to, if that makes sense. So usually I don't have anywhere to put someone with an off-camera flash. And also usually if you look at the ambient light in all of these situations, you've got some directional light coming from somewhere in the venue. All of these are natural light. None of these have an additional light on them. If I put an onboard flash, it's going to change the direction of the light on my subjects, and I don't want to do that. So I will shoot, like a crazy person, a processional with a 35-1.4 at 1.4. And lest you think that I'm, super confident, I will be sweating down my back the entire time. But don't be afraid of shooting moving subjects at 1.4. Once you get, like I said before, comfortable with it, it's going to feel pretty good. Sometimes I will shoot rooms with the 35-1.4 at 1.4, but I also make sure if I'm going to shoot a room at 1.4 that I will also shoot it at 5.6 or 6.3 or f8 so that you can see the entire room, you get the whole overall room shot. But I also find that using a 35 or an 85 at 1.4 gives you kind of a richer look to your gallery of reception images because it lets you get a different vantage point and a different focus, no pun intended, on different parts of the scene. Alternatives, 24 to 70 2.8 and the 24 to 105 f4. They get you at that 35 millimeter range. They're not going to get you to 1.4. But if you shoot the 1.4 and you decide you don't like it, but you like being at 35 millimeters, there are other options. Or you could try Canon has a 35-2.0, which is also really wonderful. And I had it for a long time until I lost it in a field. I did. We have no idea where it is. It's somewhere in Connecticut at Hickory Farms. So if you go to Hickory Farms and you find a 35-2.0, enjoy. I lost it when I was eating pizza in a field. They had a food truck and it was pizza and it was awesome. I don't know where the lens went. Probably in the same place that all of my back caps and body caps went. And the number of batteries that I have lost and grids over the past year, they're all living together. All right, 135-2.0. Hands down favorite portrait lens. Why? Because it is. I like to shoot portraits at 2.0. I like the focal length of 135. I found a lot when I was using my 70-200 that I hung out in the 135 range a lot. So I use it for portraits all day. I love it. Whether it's somebody standing on stairs, whether it's a couple cuddling in front of a fountain, whether it's somebody blowing cigar smoke in the middle of January. I love the perspective of 135. I love how flattering it is to the body. I love how 2.0 lets you have your subject in focus while still knocking out the background. I love the foreground-background relationship at 135. I love everything about it. You might hate it, and that's fine. This is where trying these lenses, and I'm not saying go out and buy all of these lenses. There are a ton of places you can rent. If you have a friend who has one, you can try it. You might find something in here that is the lens you've been missing, and none of these might work for you. That's why you don't just go buy lenses off of this must-buy list of wedding photography lenses, right? I will use it for getting ready if I have enough room. I love finding myself in a space big enough for me to use a 135-2.0 when I'm shooting prep. I'll use it for ceremonies. Again, I just love what it does to the background, just knocks it out in this really beautiful way. Also, to be able to be at 2.0, to be further back down the aisle and still work with ambient light for these really intimate moments, it's a really powerful lens. It's very fast focusing. It works really, really, really well in low light. Ceremonies, this is at the edge of the pond in Central Park, and there's someone riding a boat, like boating from the Loeb Boathouse in the background, which is really cute, until they started yelling, which was super annoying. I also really like to use it to shoot reception details, especially tables. If you look at how this focal length, this 135, compresses this table, and at 2.0, your eye goes right to where I want it to go, but then it creates this gorgeous foreground-background harmony that works really well with the way I shoot the rest of the day. So if you're looking at all of these images, and if you go to my website and you look at my website or you surf through my Instagram, there's a cohesive feel to everything that I shoot. And part of the thing that helps this cohesive feel be cohesive is not only the way I light and the way I compose, but the fact that all of my lenses are carefully chosen to work harmoniously with each other. So I love using it for small details. Yes, you have to get back, but a lot of times you have the room in a reception space. It lets me really isolate small details on tables in a way that I really like. Alternatives. 24 to 105 gets you kind of close-ish, but not really. 70 to 200, 2.8, you definitely have 135 in there. You can't go to f2, but you can go to 2.8, which is pretty good. If you are Nikon, you have the 105, 1.4. So there are definitely lenses that other manufacturers make that Canon does not make. But every lens that I put on my camera is a Canon lens. I don't use any third party or any other lenses. All of these are just Canon for your reference. You could also use the 100mm macro. The macro goes to 2.8, and it's a really wonderful portrait lens if you've never used it as a portrait lens. So let's talk about that for a bit. The 100mm macro is my hands down go-to. If it's smaller than my fist and it's a detail and I need to shoot it, I'm pulling out the macro. Am I doing good on time? I'm doing good on time. Great. Anytime I'm going to shoot a ring, 100mm macro. Now, I do not have time to delve into all of macro photography, but one thing you need to keep in mind when you're using your macro is that f2.8 on a macro is not the same as 2.8 on a 70 to 200. So all of these images, let's see, the image you see on the far right is f11. Bottom center, probably f11. Top, middle, f9. And then the other ones are probably around f4. So just bear in mind when you're using a macro, based on the magnification of the macro and the way depth of field works with that, if you're shooting your macro at 2.8, at 3.5, at f4, and you're like, I don't understand what's going on, the prongs of the ring are in focus, but the ring itself seems really soft, go up to f9, go up to f11. You're still going to have that fade away of the depth of field in the background. Just again, bear in mind you're using a macro. So alternatives to a macro, I mean, there are macro extension tubes that you can use. There are things that you can hook up to other lenses. But no other basic lens really replaces what a macro can do, because it won't let me magnify in the way that I need to magnify with that macro for the specific thing that I'm using. So while the macro in my bag might only come out for the first 20 minutes of the day and then go away never to be seen again, it's still one of the most important lenses that I have, because when I need it, I really need it and nothing else. 70 to 200 f4, totally multi-purpose telephoto, amazing lens, super crazy sharp. When I'm using my 70 to 200, I'm almost all the way at 200. Because if I'm not going to be all the way at 200, I'm going to be using my 135. Why? Personal preference. And you'll find that the longer you shoot and the more you shoot, the way you change between lenses, a lot of it really is personal preference. You'll start having pet lenses that you like the best at certain parts of the day. But my 70 to 200 f4, even though it doesn't get used quite as much as it used to, since I have my beloved 135-2.0, when I do use it, I really need it. So I will use it for dances, first dances, and parent dances. A lot of times for dances and toasts and intros, sort of those important parts of the reception. I'll have the 24 to 105 on my left camera and the 70 to 200 f4 on my right camera. Toasts. And then all kinds of other things. Portraits, ceremonies, intros, people skipping in the air as they give toasts. And the reason why I like it is because, again, just because you can Zoom doesn't mean you're lazy. I'm crouched down waiting for a ceremony to start. And the bride and her parents walk out of this red barn, and I'm all the way at 70. And then I wait, and they come closer to me, and I go all the way to 200. I don't want, during their processional, to be running up and down and back and forth with prime lenses. I know I'm going to be at f4. I know I want to stay in one spot. So the 70 to 200 is really going to get me to where I need to go. Alternatives. 24 to 105, if you find yourself hanging out on the 70 side of things and less on the 200 side of things, 70 to 200, 2.8. If f4 is not what you're looking for, you might need the 2.8. That might be your holy grail lens. It was mine for a really long time. The 135 2.0, if, like me, you find yourself hanging out at about 135, or the 100 millimeter macro is really a fantastic, I feel like very underutilized portrait lens. 28-1.8, time to dance. The 28-1.8, once we've gotten done with all of the ceremonial things during the reception, and it is all dancing all the time, I go down to one camera. Partly because why am I holding two cameras if I don't need two? When we're in those last like 2 hours where nothing else is going to happen. They've cut the cake, they've done toast, they've done all of their dances. We're just dancing at this point. I break down one camera, right? And I'm left with the other one. It's usually a Mark IV. Sometimes it's a 1DX Mark II, depending on where my brain's at that day. Again, personal preference. And the 28-1.8 is my dancing lens. I shoot that and only that for the rest of the night. So I'll have a 28-1.8, I'll have an on-camera flash. Sometimes I'll have flashes in the corner, really depends on the room. But 28-1.8 at f4 is pretty much where I'm going to be. If I am at your dance party, those will be my settings. It's just wide enough to give me kind of that intimacy that I'm looking for with a wider angle lens, but it's not so wide that I'm getting distortion. Alternatives, 24 to 105 f4, sure. If you want to zoom while you're on the dance floor, go to town. I'm using my flash on manual. I'm almost always at 8th power with my on-camera flash, and I know as long as I maintain a certain distance between my camera and my subject, my exposure will be dead on every single time. When I start putting on something like a 24 to 105 and zooming all over the place, that's when I get lazy, and I start forgetting that distance, and that's when I personally find myself getting sloppy. Also, a 24 to 105 while I'm shooting dancing is just more lens than I need. 24 to 70 might be your go-to. 35 to 8, 35 1.4. I know a ton of people who shoot dancing with their 35. Or you might want a 16 to 35. I don't like 16 to 35. I've never liked it. I bought that lens like 3 times, and I've returned it every single time. Because not because it's not a wonderful lens, but because I just don't use it. I never want to shoot dancing at 16 millimeters. That's way too wide angle for me. So again, why am I using a lens that I don't need when I am almost always at about 28 millimeters for dancing? Why not just use a 28 millimeter? That said, sometimes I need to be wider than 28 millimeters. And I bought a very old 20 millimeter 2.8 off of a friend of mine for whom this lens did not work for her. She bought it, she used it a couple of times and was like, this is not my thing, do you want this? And I was like, totally. And it gets pulled out maybe once every 3 or 4 weddings, but when I need it, I really, really need it. Like if I need a super wide room shot and I just can't get far enough back with my 24 or my 28, I might need a 20. The Hora, always a 20 millimeter. Because I am in the middle of a dangerous situation. It is loud, it is chaotic, it is hectic. I'm getting stepped on, I'm getting elbowed, the camera's getting knocked back in my face. They're having a heck of a good time and they're not paying any attention to me, which is as it should be. But I kind of become collateral damage during some of these wilder dances. But I need to be a little bit wider because I just don't have the room not to be. So the 20 millimeter is my go-to Hora lens, or if I know that I'm going to be stuck in a situation where I don't have a lot of room, and I just need something a little bit wider. Again, it doesn't get used a lot, but when I need it, I really, really need it. Alternative, 16 to 35. So, before you go buy the next lens in your bag, before you buy anything, look at what you've got. Look at where you gravitate. Is there a focal length that you hang out at a lot? If you're using a 70 to 200, do you hang out at 200 a lot? Do you hang out at 135? Do you want more or less background? What story are you trying to tell? Until you know the images you're trying to make and the relationship you're trying to have with the story that you're telling, you can't possibly know what the next lens you're going to buy is going to be.
So I am very interested in developing further my style and even finding it. So do you have any detailed advice on doing that? It sounds like you're very precise with, you said if you find yourself in 135, do you like scroll through your images and find all the focal lengths, or like what's the process to do that?
I want you guys to like me, but this is going to make me sound super nerd. All right. And I'm going to come stand in front of my friend Charmy and say this in front of her, because it's something I've been trying to tell her to do. I have a Lightroom catalog that I actually hold all of my favorite images in. So when I put together a presentation like this, and I need to go find a bunch of images, or if I'm doing a year-end post and I'm like, oh, I want to post all of my favorite shoe shots from last year. Every time I shoot a wedding and I call my images down, there's usually anywhere between about 30 and 50 that are my favorites. Those are the ones that are going to end up on my blog, on social media, on my website. They're my best of the best. They're my client's sneak peek. I take the raw file from that and the edited version and I put it in a Lightroom catalog, and then I keyword them. So I have a master Lightroom catalog that has like 9,500 images in it at this point, and they've all been keyworded. So it could be like wedding, New Yorker hotel, winter, any identifying thing that I might want to find later. Rings, shoes, portrait of the couple, first dance, things like that. And then I can actually look through by using not only the keywords, but also just the data in your images. In Lightroom, when I'm in library mode, I can look and say, okay, show me every single image that I shot in 2017 with the 135 millimeter at f2. And it will show you. It's just how you can sort. And honestly, the way that I developed my style and the way that I figured out where I'm at the most is by shooting for 18 years. And it's that thing that nobody wants to do, which is like do the work, right? And it's hard because you want to jump right to I have my vision. You want to jump right to this is where I'm comfortable with, this is what I like. But I started shooting in 2002, and I would say that it wasn't really until about January of last year that I felt like I was rolling with the bag of gear this was it, these were my tools. Because things change and styles change, and you might find yourself, and then 2 years from now you might find something else. So if you want to find your style, go take pictures. Whether it's with paying clients, whether it's collaborating with people you like, setting up shoots just for fun, the more you shoot, the more you'll learn what you like to shoot. And it's frustrating because it does take time, but it's kind of like going to the gym. It's really horrible at first. I mean, let's be clear, it's horrible all the time. But you feel like you're going to die much less. The more you go, the more you keep going, right? It gets easier. And it's the same thing with knowing how you like to see. The more you shoot and the more you see the world, the more you'll understand how you like to see the world and how you like to show the world. So go take a lot of pictures. Sorry. I wish I had something more exciting. Everyone's like, ugh. Yes.
Hey, Susan. Thank you for this wonderful list.
You're welcome.
I have a question for you. So what are your go-to lenses for portraits in studio or dance portraits?
24 to 105.
Oh, good. Thanks.
That's it. No, I have a studio out in Brooklyn. It is 1,000 square feet. It is my pride and joy. I love it so much. And the 24 to 105 is my go-to lens in there. Sometimes the 85-1 too, if I'm feeling crazy. I saw a hand. There was a hand. Yes.
Hi, Susan. Fantastic talk. And yeah, I appreciate you give so detailed instruction about so many lenses. And I saw that so for many fantastic pictures, actually, you use the flash. And so I think you probably also give us introduction about the best flash or the flash you want to recommend. Because I always take events with two lenses. One is 24-70 and the other is 70 and 200, and both f2.8. And my problem is I need to set up the flash system, but the transmitter, everything should be consistent. So you can invest only one system. You cannot invest a different flash system. So I want to know which flash system and which transmitter you use. Thanks.
So I have, all my flashes are Canon flashes. And I use the STE3RT, the Canon transmitter, which talks directly to the flashes. And it's whether or not I have one off-camera flash and I'm using it for family portraits, or whether I have them in the rooms. It will let me change channels. It will let me use some but not all. I really like to keep everything consistent. I like to keep everything under one brand, because then I know things all talk to each other really well. So I have six different flashes. Wow. All right, I have 6 different flashes that I am using in some combination of each other throughout the day. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 5, but I also always really like backups. But there are lots of different manufacturers of different types of flashes. Again, I'm one of those weird people that I just like everything to be under the same brand and under the same umbrella, because if I start having to get third-party things to talk to this and talk to that, I just feel less cohesive, if that makes sense. I don't know where the mic went. I saw it floating around. Yes.
Hi, Susan.
Hey.
My name is Joshua.
I know you.
Super creepy, right?
Well, he stands up and he's got his hat pulled
My
down.
name is Joshua.
I've known him for a really long time.
All right.
This is Joshua Duane. You should look him up. He's an amazing photographer, and he's trying to hide from us. So, thank you.
First
You're
off,
like-
your hairdo's amazing. I love the new hairdo. So my question, in the beginning of your presentation, you showed your images, especially your portraits. You shot them with like 2 different focal lengths. Is that like a norm? Is that, like, how do you approach that sort of?
A lot of times, yeah. Because,
Okay.
I mean, you know, we've got like 5 minutes to take pictures on a wedding day, and we're in New York, which is a special circle of difficulty with shooting weddings, because people are always like, are you gonna see the people in the background? And I'm like, yes, there are 1 million people just on this street. I don't know what to do. But that's the having 2 cameras on each hip. So like I'll put up the 135 and I'll take a shot, and then I'll pull it down, I'll pull up the 35-1.4 and take another shot, so I get 2 shots of the same scene. And I constantly have to keep reminding myself to do that, because I'll get stuck with just the 135-2.0 and I'll just shoot everything at 135-2.0, but then it all looks the same. So I just have to keep reminding myself to pick up the other camera and to keep seeing the scene. And I don't know why you're asking me questions, because seriously, look up this guy's work. Like, stop hiding under the hat. But yeah, it's the 2-camera thing. Yeah.
My name is Alma. I'm also a Brooklyn resident. I wanted to know, I feel like especially this time of year, I'm kind of burnt out after
Totally
wedding
burnt out.
season.
Totally burnt
obviously.
out. Being dead honest, yeah.
I don't necessarily want to go out and shoot and get
No.
creative. So what do you do to kind of find inspiration? I think you do a great job at, bringing location into your work. And
I do
think-
nothing.
I love it.
I'm not even
you must
kidding.
do something. Like,
No,
what
I
do you
don't.
like?
Like Charmy can attest, I do nothing.
You
Last
just-
night I watched 3 hours of Russian Doll on Netflix.
So you
I
relax.
do nothing.
You relax.
And so the question was, what do you do when you're burnt out? And I found that the worst thing I could do when I was burnt out is try to go work. Yeah. When I'm burnt out, y'all, I do nothing. And by nothing, I mean nothing. I watch TV, I take naps, I read books, we're about to go on a vacation. I go do something that has nothing to do with photography. And I just honestly find that the more I take care of myself and the more I'm out in the world living my life outside of photography, I start to miss it. And that's what inspires me to keep going. So the worst thing I can do for myself is to just work. And it can be as simple, and when I say work, I mean taking pictures. I don't mind the computer work, none of that bothers me, but to get my inspiration back, I need to get the camera out of my hand for a while. Because it's too much sometimes, honestly. It's just put it away and go read a book and take a nap. Thanks.
A big applause for Susan Stripling, amazing presentation.